moving on to long ball number 3, with things, a lot of action, a lot of competitions happening. Club World Cup, they're playing as well.
No,
the
really?
the semifinals are set after quarterfinals play to completion. Curious to throw it out there is who's all watching this still. Club World Cup, historically, the teams that were in it, I mean, it was much smaller. The teams that are in it cared, but no one else really seemed to. Obviously, it's expanded, so more teams are involved. So, if they're in it, more fan bases are involved, more teams cared. But now that it's being parsed down to, the final 4, who's all watching this still? Is this getting more serious? Are you ramping up your excitement, or is it tapering off because there's less, unique matchups and different teams that we don't often see?
That's where I'm at. Now, I'm not going to say I'm speaking for everybody. I'm sure there are American soccer fans who are very much still engaged with this competition, right? I'm sure there are people that are like, oh, it's awesome. We may get, Rob, imagine this. We may get a Champions League winner against the Conference League winner in the final of the Club World Cup. What could be more exciting than that? I mean, I don't know. I do see the value, and I've talked about this before, right? I've seen the value of there being those unique matchups, of there being an opportunity to see teams that don't usually get to play one another. And that is largely in the story of this tournament, it's been South America versus Europe, right? We've seen some Asian teams. We had Al Hilal, give Al Hilal credit for the run that they made and the upset that they pulled off against Manchester City. Massive part of this story. But that kind of, and we do have one left. I mean, let's not pretend like Fluminense versus Chelsea isn't fascinating. It is. And maybe Fluminense makes a final and we do get South America versus Europe.
And that would be the best case scenario,
for me as a neutral. As a neutral, that would be the best case scenario. I think if you're FIFA, you want Chelsea versus one of the European powers, PSG or Real Madrid. I think that's what you want. I don't think you want Fluminense. As much as Fluminense has been a story, and as much as their fans have been a story in this tournament, as much as Brazilian support has been a story in this tournament, I think if you're talking about global viewers and all the things that FIFA's trying to drive here, you want Chelsea versus Real Madrid, Chelsea versus PSG. Probably Chelsea versus Real Madrid, because Real Madrid is the monster, right? They are the biggest club left here. So I don't know. I mean, in terms of the quality of the play, watching back that PSG Bayern game, surface maybe not the best. Manuel Neuer makes some great saves, makes some howlers in terms of distribution, and then slips on the Doué shot that eventually gives PSG the victory. Yeah, I don't know. I like that. That I don't think was a great advertisement for the tournament. What it's supposed to be, because it wasn't ideal in terms of the situation there in Atlanta.
And in some regards, this competition, the performance on the field hasn't been as necessarily as important as the names involved, it seems like, at least on the presentation style. Like, that is a Champions League, a UEFA Champions League quarterfinal matchup, PSG versus Bayern, I believe. And I think just getting those matchups, the volume of that is what they're looking for. Is like, hey, shiny 2 names, watch this. But you're saying that maybe some of the quality of it wasn't necessarily up to par, but that's kind of how this whole competition's been, because they're tired. Would you say anyone's peak? There's been, to be fair, PSG, some of their games, they have looked just about, their full PSG strength, but they even had some howlers. I think they lost one of the games in the group stage because they looked completely hot and out of energy. So you wouldn't say this competition has had like peak. The best teams in the world, some of the best teams in the world are here at least. But would you say we've seen the best football in the world during this competition? I feel like you'd really have to be digging at scraps to think that like we saw peak of the sport at the club level.
Yeah, no, look, okay, you're right. Like, I guess it is sort of like what FIFA was trying to accomplish outside of making money, because we know that, right? This is about making money for FIFA.
Dancing around that a bit,
If you are going to give them credit for creating a competition that is meant to put on display teams from around the world, rather than sort of, and again, FIFA's play here is we can do something UEFA can't, which is bring in the Brazilian teams and the Asian teams and teams from around the globe and make it more interesting that way, make it more of a celebration of football, a la the World Cup, right? That's what they're trying to replicate here. Now, I think the dynamics are clearly different because all Brazilians root for one national team. All Brazilians don't root for the same club teams. You're not, you know, that's going to be a hard sell. So you're not like, it's not like Botafogo fans are suddenly like, Fluminense, go win it. Some might, I guess, but there's probably not a lot of solidarity there when you play them in the league and you want to beat them every time and Botafogo reigning champions and all those things. So I guess your point is, if it's not about the best soccer, like if it's not about putting on display the best quality of soccer, then it's about the competition. It's about the spirit of it. It's about the desire to prove yourself world champion if you do get a chance to go up against teams like Botafogo or Fluminense or Palmeiras or whatever. And I guess we have seen that. I do think it's very easy to be reductively negative and say like, oh, because it's PSG and Real Madrid and because it could be Chelsea and one of those teams, it's boring because it's just like Europe. But it hasn't been. It hasn't been just like Europe leading up to this. It has been fascinating. It has been interesting. You mentioned Botafogo beating PSG. I'm sure a lot of people didn't have that because it was the assumption that the European champion would be able to beat any team that they face, even a good Brazilian one. And that kind of leaves out the ability to take into account how tired are the European players, how in form are the South American players, how do the surfaces in various places, especially indoors where they've laid down some grass over turf, or in Seattle where they laid down grass over turf. How does that affect it? How do the atmospheres affect this? How does the weather? We've had weather delays in this thing, right? So all of that, how does the heat affect this? All of that is I do think that if you're being kind to the competition, you're right, Rob. You can kind of find some unique things about it.
Yeah, there's some quirks here and there. And I remind you guys that this is an interactive show. We are working towards becoming a town square, so to speak, of American soccer conversation. Parker Smith, conundrum of rooting for an upset. Very fun in the match at hand, but usually leaves you with a following match that's a bit less exciting than two better teams going at it.
Well, okay, let me address that because shout out to Parker, who's a MK Ultra and a member. Be like Parker. So you know, in the sense of if you're talking about the knockout phase, right, and whether this has been for some people less interesting in the knockout phase than it was in the group phase because you've had a little less variety in terms of where the teams come from. Unfortunately, I do think this is unfortunate. One side of the bracket broke out completely European. Right? You had Flamengo losing to Bayern. You had Monterrey losing to Dortmund. You had Miami losing to PSG, all in that round of 16. So you ended up with European teams moving on to the quarterfinals, European teams in the semi now with PSG and Real Madrid. On the other side, like we had Fluminense beat Inter Milan. That's, hey, you know, again, Inter Milan may have fallen apart a bit after their Champions League final appearance. Their manager may have run off to go coach in Saudi Arabia, but that's still notable that Fluminense beat and again, obviously Al Hilal beating Manchester City in a wild 4-3 game. Like that should be enough of a selling point to say that's what the tournament's supposed to be. There we go. Let's move on.
And some other interesting things. We're like stuck in our bubble here in the United States. I'm curious, like looking outside of our own perspective of this. I've seen some English coverage of it saying that, you know, when Premier League team or Premier League, the whole like floating thing, like will Premier League or any other big European leagues play an actual in-league game in the United States? And I've seen that conversation from talking heads overseas saying that, like, of course they would. They pack out all the stadiums for all these exhibitions. Of course they'd love it. But after this competition, I feel like the kind of not necessarily just because you put a European team in America, it's going to sell out no matter what. I think that has that take has been dispelled. But I wanted to go back to the very beginning of the comments. Andy, one of our regular viewers, he was overseas in Colombia, and he said the Club World Cup was on every bar's TV. Gold Cup available to a degree. I thought that was interesting that, like, you know, places outside of our shores, maybe a little bit more tuned in. Maybe we're a little bit more cynical than maybe some others on this.
Admittedly. And I don't want to what's the phrase? Yuck anybody's yum. Like, I don't want to sit here and be like, you shouldn't like this thing because it's whatever cynical reason I find not to like it. Everybody it has the right to come to this on their own terms. And you don't even have to like factor FIFA and Gianni Infantino into it if you don't want to. For its own sake, the Club World Cup has been entertaining. I just wish I had been able to give it more attention because it happened with all these other things going on, Rob. And it was just the soccer was so thick this summer. It's like the humidity around here in DC. It's like, all right, it's a lot of soccer right now.
Yeah, feast or famine. What are we going to do in August? I mean, we've been trying to like dig through multiple competitions, and now we're going to have to figure something out. And like, there's a women's Euros that started. I haven't watched any of that I normally would due to the density. And one final note from the comments, Andy, again, Club World Cup reminds them that technically only 8 stadiums are World Cup ready. And I don't know, is that true? Have we, between the Gold Cup and the Club World Cup, I would say we're not exactly like 100% ready at these places, it seems.
Yeah, I think there's some things there. I can't speak to that specifically in a lot of places. Again, I know we're doing the sod over the turf. I think it's going to be different slightly, and hopefully better installed. I don't know if that's the right word. They're spending a lot of money. I mean, I know in Seattle because of my friend Jeremiah O'Shan, who runs Sounder at Heart, they laid down the grass on top of the turf, and then they're going to take it out. They're going to pull it right back up, and then next year, we're going to do this all over again. It's been wild.
Yeah. Club World Cup. So we're in the semifinal stage. Fluminense versus Chelsea on Tuesday, and a PSG versus Madrid Wednesday. The final to come on Sunday night. If you're watching this and if you haven't hit subscribe yet, do so now. Join the close to 2,800 folks who are members, subscribers of Morning Kick Round. If you want to kick your support of this channel up a notch, $3.99 a month, become an MK Ultra. I saw somebody in the chat discovered kind of the origins of what MK Ultra, kind of the origin of that thread is, and he prefers the soccer version, as do we. Just a little fun there. But when you become a member, you get early access to videos, you get priority commenting on the live streams. And one of the best features is you get access to the Morning Kick Round Discord server that has threads on subjects from local soccer, MLS, the men's national team, women's national team, and just general topics. And I've really been enjoying the intros. It's almost like a Soccerholic sort of opening up like, hi, I'm Robert. I'm a Soccerholic. I watch 20 games a week. Please help me. But those have been really fun. MK Ultras, thank you for, enriching that conversation there.
I do appreciate this, and I can speak to this in a different context. So when I was doing my very American soccer-focused radio show, The United States of Soccer, on Sirius XM, and RIP to that show, I do miss doing it. In the beginning of that show, I get a lot of people who would call and give me their bio, give me their entire resume. Like, I was born here, and I played the game there, and I was at this level, and I know this, I watched this tournament, and I look, eventually I kind of like, okay, I thank you, Mr. English guy who moved to America in 1963. Thank you for telling me your story. But I do appreciate, especially for American soccer fans, and especially for those of us for whom it wasn't a thing passed down from our family. And that would be my case, not yours, Robert. But in my case, my parents knew jack crap about soccer. They put me in it when I was 8 years old, and here we are. Now I got to pass it on to my kids.
Tip of the cap, first gen Socceroos here.
There you go.
Soccerista. Well, anyway, hit subscribe, become a member. You can support on ko-fi.com/morningkickround. We got some very specific goals there. You can follow on social media at mkickround on X, Instagram, Blue Sky. You can write us a note, morningkickround@gmail.com, or find us as a podcast, Morning Kick Round, and your favorite podcast platform.